Parrish with us today, and she's going to share some of her amazing insights with you, especially when it comes to cloud security. BDPA Atlanta is a membership organization, and we have what I consider 3 pillars. One focusing on professional development, so those that are either in industry or looking to change jobs and move into the IT field, the collegiate sector, as well as the K through 12 sector. We're excited to expose all of our membership and guests to technology, and we're even more excited about tonight's session. So with that, I will hand it over to John and Shamika to introduce our speaker, and I'll wave bye to everyone. I know this is going to be an amazing meeting, and I'm looking forward to catching up on the recording. Have a great evening.
See you, Victor. Have fun.
Thanks, Victor.
Sure, I guess really quick, I'll just say thanks everyone for joining. I think Victor gave a pretty decent background on BDPA. I'll be dropping more links in the chat for how to stay connected. And if there are any other questions about BDPA. One thing Victor did not mention, so this is kind of our first session probably since I think July. We took a little break to have some time for folks to go to the conference. And the Atlanta chapter actually won chapter of the year for this season. So I guess congrats to all of the Atlanta chapter board members and all the volunteers that have been helping us out. And if you want to, if you want to get involved, feel free to reach out to me or to Ray or Victor anytime. So I'll hand it over to KB.
Yeah, I was going to say congratulations to you and Victor on that. What a great accomplishment. There's 30 chapters, so to win out of that says a lot. So you and Victor and the whole team's doing a lot of really great things, and you know that's what happens when you do great things. You get acknowledged and recognized. So congratulations on that. So happy to be here again this month. And Ashley, I thank you so much for sticking with us here on part 2 of the cloud transformation series. What a great topic on security. So Ashley is Senior Director at Equifax in the cloud area. And last month we had a great session just about kind of overall, cloud transformation and a lot of the areas, that are important to companies going in that direction. So we thought we'd kind of hover over and focus in on the security areas. That was one of the most important things to companies and certainly employees and people out there trying to decide which way do I pivot with my career? Do I invest in security certifications and things like that to get into this world? Is this a good place for me to aim towards? So I think it is. I think Ashley will talk a little bit about that as well as amongst a lot of other things. But I'll stop talking and let you hear from Ashleigh. So welcome again, Ashleigh. Thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, this is part 2. So if you missed the first one, you can absolutely, see the recording from the first one. Just to kind of segue, where we'll pick up tonight versus kind of what we covered. What we covered in the first one was just more about just kind of a little bit more of an overview, like John said, around just cloud transformation as a whole. And then now looking at cloud security, it's obviously at the top of the list for what every company not only needs to account for to ensure that their data is secure, but also to ensure that you can protect yourself from all of the lovely hacking and ransomware and malware attacks that are going on. And data breaches, etc. So, security is one of those topics that we could do 2 or 3 sessions. And so I crammed a lot in a couple of slides. and I won't be able to cover everything, but I'm definitely going to cover, I think, enough of that landscape to be able to give you a good overview, as well as hopefully, kind of spike your interest, right? There's a lot of good career opportunities in cloud security because it is a very high profile and or very high demand job, jobs that are needed for those types of roles. So whether you're looking at getting certified or not, or just even do an internship to get into an analyst position, there's paid internships and there's all kind of stuff that really would get you in that space if you're interested. So let's get started. And there we go. So I'm going to start out with cloud data breaches. It's a big one. Obviously, it's public knowledge. Equifax, where I'm at, August for me was 3 years. And we had a breach back in, I think, 2017. Us along with Capital One and Target, and there's a lovely list of companies that have all experienced some of the non-fun of having a data breach. I joined to take over cloud transformation and also ensure that our footprint really revolves around coming out of a data breach, and then also ensuring that it doesn't happen again. So question on the slide: how is your company, if you're at one, protecting itself from cloud data breaches and the costly ransomware attacks? We know the recent ransomware attack that impacted the gasoline pipelines was detrimental. I mean, it went all the way across, impacting the country. So, several companies, including ours and others, are going through those ransomware kind of tabletop exercises of let's go pressure test what that would really look like. What's really important to call out for this is if you look at the diagram over on the right, there is a shared responsibility model when you talk about data, either data risk, data exposure, data security, and then data breaches. So a lot of times it's like, oh, so-and-so had a data breach and it's 100% on them. Well, that's true to a degree, but there's also a responsibility model that includes customer responsibility, your company's cloud security and infrastructure, as well as the cloud provider's responsibility. So if I have all of my data sitting in Amazon and Google, then guess what? There's only so much that I can do as Equifax for compensating controls and security controls on top of what Google's responsible for because we're sitting in their data centers. So it's just really important to make sure that when you're thinking of cloud security, it's not just on-prem security that you own and are responsible for the data centers yourselves. You're sitting in cloud provider data centers, so it's 100% what security do they have in place. And all of that applies when you're thinking about picking a cloud provider. Some are definitely more mature than others in some spaces, and it just it plays into the decision-making process. But another scenario is the cost, right? Literally the 2021 some report studies, and I was kind of digging for several, but I liked this one because it seems the most accurate based on historical and where we've landed knowledge. The average cost of either remediating and or recovering from a data breach is over $4 million. And that's not a one-time necessarily effort. It's totally insane the amount of money that you have to put into, whether it's bringing in consultants to help, identify quickly where improvements and or specific infrastructure components need to be, advanced, whether it's just bringing in an entire project management team, whether it's just bringing on, more of your workforce, all of that adds up very quickly and the cost is insane. So you really do have to account for, what do I need to do? So this is really for the business, right? If it's going to cost me X $10 million in 2020, but I know that I want to avoid spending, $20 million in 2021 for a breach, then that $10 million is worth spending. So I'm using that as an example, but that definitely is one of the things that our companies are having to take into consideration around what we're doing to increase all of the not only infrastructure and security stacks, but as well as the teams that are maintaining and supporting it. So if you think about it, cloud, the concept around cloud is exactly the same of what you would have to do to have all of those individuals wrapped around supporting a data center if you are responsible for supporting your data centers. So it's really just, it's the same scenario, but just cloud specific versus on-prem. So I'll pause there. Any questions before I move on? All right. So another good one, and this, I really like this diagram. I use it all the time just because it gives a holistic view of cloud network and security. So cloud network and security, they're like loaded, topics, because obviously foundationally your infrastructure, your security, and your network, those 100% under that yellow, under that yellow umbrella in this diagram, that is the foundational layer that either makes or breaks, what you're doing in cloud. If you don't get security right and you don't get network right, then you are opening up risk to either expose data or, expose a customer, expose whatever else is sitting on your corporate network. I mean, you name it, there's 1,000 access points that are at risk. And so you'll notice endpoints is in there as well. Those endpoints matter. So whatever we do to wrap, network and security around all three of those foundational components, they 100% are where you have to spend your money and your resources and your time to make things as secure as possible. And then, what I reference in the slide is, it's not only embedding those layers of protection around your data, but it's also your services, your traffic, and so what I do at Equifax revolves around all of this cloud umbrella. I'm 100% the foundational layer of managing, what we consider the platform foundational org access and org policies, as well as network security and just overall infrastructure that supports that. So it's a big umbrella, but it's almost the most important critical umbrella as well. So I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive on cloud network. Cloud network is one of those, I try to do as much as I could to put some high level things in one slide because there could be several. But cloud network, one of the things that has really, I've done this now at 2 different companies, is you have to look at your network infrastructure, right? So think about DNS, your routers, any of your firewalls. There's a way to automate and run pipelines just like you would for anything else for an application on a front end side. On the infrastructure side, for network infrastructure, you can also wrap, automation around how you deploy routers, how you go and implement firewall rules, what you do for DNS. We also have subnet allocation, and subnet allocation is a big one because if you think about what cloud providers do, they have a platform. You're sitting, you're basically sitting in their, in their buckets, in their data centers. But 100% where you benefit from using a cloud provider is using their services. So if they have services that allow you to, do a data migration or host your data, or, or if they have services that I'm trying to think of, like Amazon has several services, Google has several services. But if you don't have certain subnets, then, if you want to use Kubernetes and you don't have a subnet allocated, guess what? You can't manage and you can't run your workloads. So subnet allocation for cloud network is a big one. But you also have to make sure that your IP ranges and your IP allocation strategy makes sense. Otherwise, you're going to saturate your network and you're going to start running out of IP space. And companies run into that problem all the time. and then it's detrimental because the business can't move forward and the business can't operate. Cloud region deployments is kind of the left side of, of this diagram, talks about the on-prem kind of hub and spoke model. So if that's foreign concept to folks, basically what it means is, if you're in the process of getting out of data centers and moving to the cloud, you might be 40% in the cloud, but still 60%, on-prem in your own data center. What it allows you to do is say, sure, you're going to have some workloads where you've got applications running in the cloud on the spoke side, and they're still going to need to talk back to on-prem. Say if you have Jenkins or some other tool that they need to use, then they have to go back and forth between cloud and on-prem. Well, that hub model in network for transformations, for any type of security transformation, that cloud security hub is critical, because what it allows you to do is put a cloud or network security stack in place. And it lets you say anything that needs to go from, this source, which is cloud, and make it back to on-prem as your destination, then it's got to go through a network security stack, and it's going to go through certain firewalls, and it's going to be 10 times more secure than it would if you weren't necessarily having that middleman connection. But it's a solution that works very well in cloud transformations. It's expensive. But like I said, right, that's where the business has to outweigh the cost for what it is that they're trying to secure. And every single, time you're needing to run traffic from cloud to on-prem, you really need that level of security. So, that kind of plays into the bullet point cloud network security stacks. And then it also plays into, external customers versus SaaS or external services. And then anytime you're needing to get out to the internet. So every single time you're needing to get out to the internet, that's where some hacker is sitting there waiting to be able to say, oh, yep, I just got to get into, this bucket, and now I see all of this data. So you really have to treat those access points as the most secure places that you have within your organization and within your cloud and on-prem footprint.
Ashley,
So-
would a direct connect work just as well in this particular configuration?
Yeah, so if you're in cloud and hey, I just need to be able to direct connect back to the provider, then absolutely. You don't want to necessarily, you can do T1 lines and other things that are going to let you get from point A to point B. So just because I'm showing this doesn't mean it's the only way. Absolutely, direct connects are usually fantastic if you can put them in place with providers, because guess what? They're very inexpensive monthly versus a circuit or a T1 line or anything else that's going to be fiber. It's going to get costly monthly, and it's going to be something that you have to be dependent on the cloud, basically circuit providers to maintain and support for you and keep them up.
Yeah, it just seems it's a little bit management intensive as well. If you with the hub spoke, I mean, it all depends on company size, right? If you have the resources to manage it that way, then great. But I mean, you can put a direct connect and then encrypt them both in and
100%.
make sure that
Well, that's a good call out. So I'll make sure before we publish this that I kind of I might add another slide and just reference this makes sense for global companies. And I've been in large global companies where we've needed to have, basically we have a network security stack running for global regions. So I've got, Europe, I've got Australia, I've got Canada, I've got the US, we have Latin America, right? And it's very difficult. So the good thing is those hubs, I need to just add it to the diagram. They actually would direct connect into the cloud provider. So it just means that instead of going directly from, your VPC sitting in Google to the provider outside of needing to get something out of their managed network, you're also, like Equifax is going to be twice as picky, and we're going to make everyone go back through another firewall. You know what I mean? So it really just depends on the use case of what the company needs to solve for and how granular or extensive you need your, your connections to be. I think that's a fair statement. Good question. What else? Network gives people's makes people's head hurt, and I've been doing it for a really long time. So trying to think, it's really just trying to tie back how network plays into security, because security network is kind of more of the terminology now versus just network, by itself, if that makes sense.
Ashley, can I ask just your opinion on Kubernetes? So earlier in the year, this year, there were a number of our clients are some of the larger consultancies, and they were building out they just called it straight up their Kubernetes teams. And they were looking for, volumes of them, like, hey, Matrix, find me, we need 10 more Kubernetes people to be on this team. They can work remote, and we help them with a lot of that. I'm not seeing quite as much of that demand coming now from them. So I don't know if has it moved on to something else, or do you think?
It was very popular, I guess, last year, maybe the year before, just because it was kind of newer. It was the thing. It's like anything in technology, right? Whatever's the new and shiny thing, it's like, I need to do this and I need to adopt it quickly. The reality, though, is if you think about it, Kubernetes is one of those things, spinning up a Kubernetes cluster, maintaining your workloads, making sure that how they're pulling container images and all of those things, and being compliant, and adhering to certain policies, whitelist policies, and all of those things. It really is falling a lot under SREs. So, you'll notice that in Google, it's called GKE, and Amazon, it's called EKS, right? That's just one of the components that they really want some of their, more site reliability engineers or whatever, whatever the more general, like engineering, role, that's just an area they need to have, but not necessarily like a Kubernetes engineer. So I think it's like any new feature, right? It's something new that allows companies to be able to do, more than what they've been able to manage in a more scalable or streamlined way. And but yeah, I think it's just it's dwindled a little bit as being like this hyped thing. Now it's just like, that's how you can manage, you can spin up clusters, you can create VMs, and you can do things in just a more, in an easier way to manage your workloads.
Gotcha.
But yeah, you'll notice there's a lot of SRE roles and no SRE resumes. So we have at Equifax
very true.
several SRE openings, and literally we have agencies telling us like there's no candidates. So it's interesting. But that's where you start, looking at systems engineers, and you can look at other roles to determine, because some of those people have touched some of those technologies like Kubernetes or something else, even if it's not 100% relative to, what I mean, what they have on their resume. So
yeah,
good question.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So let's talk about identity and access. This is a world of fun. I have also lived in IAM for several years. IAM is tricky because, as you can imagine, right, is the fundamental foundation of saying when and how someone's able to access something. So outside of network access, which is going to manage traffic and, and certain endpoint, source destination type scenarios, identity and access is going to also help manage the human being side of things. So you have automated pipelines, which are key, just like in anything else for cloud transformation or cloud. You got to be using automation. You can't be clicking in a console and trying to do things and support things without using automated pipelines. So, Terraform and CI/CD are the images I have shown there. There's, IAM, what we call SDLC modules. And that means if you have like a dev non-prod environment versus a UAT production environment, well, depending on what flavor of SDLC environment type you choose, then you're going to have a different IAM roles, right? You might, in a dev development environment, you might have more permissions to go, try to, create something, edit something, push something, and be more in that, what you would consider POC, sandbox, more development environment. But once you get to production, it should be in cloud, and it's 100% set up that way. With us at Equifax, you have 0 edit access, so you are required to use CI/CD. And once it's there, if you need to make a change, you got to take it back to your your lower SDLC environments and then redeploy to production. So that's a big one for IAM, any type of custom roles, as well as service accounts in cloud. Service accounts give people headaches because a lot of people just don't understand them, but there's a way that you can remove a lot of human access for being able to do certain things, and just apply service accounts. And what that means is you're giving the service account permission to go emulate and do things in your deployment lifecycle, instead of needing one of your team members to do it. And then there's cloud environment binding. So me and my team, we also handle some provisioning. Occasionally, if IAM modules are needing to get bound to an environment, then all of that gets done in an automated lifecycle at the time of like VPC creation. So there's a huge component of automated pipelines that accounts for when you hand off cloud environments to teams, then it's already defaulted to have those layers of IAM protection for them. And, a lot of that is not necessarily up for debate. It's based on the security, the security team's, decision on what they deem is or is not permitted. There's also access tools, right? So Savient and SailPoint are a couple. There's a few more, but those just help manage access groups and entitlements, so you can have least privilege access to any of your, a lot of your cloud instances or environments. And then everybody knows authentication. So cell phones have been a headache for a lot of companies, and as far as securing data, not being able to copy paste things, not being able to do things. MFA and Okta and Ping are different ways that you can ensure that there is a second layer of protection. And you'll notice just about everybody's adopted that in the last few years. Whether you're getting on to a website to pay a credit card or whatever, they're, getting on for your email, they're all trying to kind of re-authenticate you, and you're going to get codes constantly. But that's a good thing because it's further protecting what you are doing and what you don't want others to have access to. And then finally, data protection. So encryption is a massive topic. And, then obviously KMS, so key management, rotating keys, using CyberArk or some other way of being able to try to have more of an automated way of doing that, or store it, way to store it. That key management, along with any type of, anything under the data protection umbrella is super important. So those are my high level. It's a lot, but those were, kind of the core things for identity and access. Does anybody have any questions there? Anybody have ever had any exposure with any of the IAM stuff? Not exposure as in bad, but like, have you, been engaged with any of that in any of your teams or jobs in the past?
This is Harold. I've used the IAM modules in Amazon, for the workloads that we develop and put on AWS. So we do a fair amount of creating custom roles, creating groups, and assigning users to those groups. So we have developers that develop applications on AWS. So
Nice.
Always have to do that, just to,
Absolutely.
and making sure that you're, as they come and as they go, you have to make sure that you're routinely
Exactly.
assessing who belongs where and doing what and what policies belong to them. So
Yeah, so Amazon's I also, my team also manages Amazon, and what's interesting about Amazon is this, that teams can also create their own, sometimes if if you don't lock it down, they can create their own security groups. And so some of that crosses cross-pollinates with where IAM needs to live. But yeah, I mean, that's where even in the tools, right? If a company uses a certain tool method, then we also have like monthly and or quarterly certifications, which means, whoever's responsible for going and doing those audits is basically held accountable for going and ensuring if someone rolled off, you know what I mean? Did those bindings get removed? Has their access been removed? Are they still in a group and they don't need to be? Is someone overprivileged and, has gotten past a gate where, you know what I mean, they didn't get the proper approvals? So all of that plays into the governance and compliance of how your company, chooses to operate. But it's really important, and it really should be a hygiene item that is managed either monthly or quarterly at a minimum.
yeah, great.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I can't remember. Is that it? Yeah. It was hard. I was like, okay, I can only do a couple slides because my brain was hurting. There's a lot of information. So, I guess I'll kind of open it up for everyone, even if it's not something that's been covered in this slide. Are there other topics that kind of, you have in the just general cloud security arena?
Well, I have a question. So knowing that Equifax had the breach, right? I mean, and then all of the different malware that have been deposited in companies and caused so many headaches. Does Equifax, or have you contemplated a response plan? Someone's deposited a malware that's propagating through it, in Equifax. What is the remedy that you've contemplated for that?
Well, just to be clear, we don't have malware in Equifax, so
No, I'm just saying if.
but I have to. This will be shared publicly. So, but yes, if, right, we'll just use a company instead of Equifax, because then it'll be like all over LinkedIn that somebody heard, No, we're very, very picky about how things get specified. So yeah, in an example where there's a ransomware or a malware attack, yes, there is a response plan. One, it plays into whether or not a company knows 100% that they can, legitimately activate on their disaster recovery, right? We do, monkey events and stuff like that all the time. It's not even like a question. It's very mandatory. What you have to do is literally go all the way down into the layers of at what level can are you going to cut off access? Does that make sense? So when you're talking about ransomware or malware, there's certain things that you can do to cut off access at the network level. And you could look at, how you cut off access more in that encryption level, right? Sometimes if a company is encrypting a certain way, then, you can go cut off access, but then you're losing data, right? So then what's your backup strategy to make sure that if you're going to need to do that in an event, then, you know what I mean? How do you recover your data? So it gets tricky. That's kind of a loaded question, but it's a good one because it really just plays into the spider web of whatever action you need to take. You also have to have an action to account for whatever that impact is. Does that make sense? So just because you're taking actions to stop whoever's trying to penetrate, you also have to make sure that you don't go and do things that are detrimental, you know what I mean, to your environment or, or to what the company is responsible for as well, without being able to put it back in place.
Yeah.
Is that, does that
Yeah,
make sense?
it does. It gives me a scenario to work with. I mean, I've been contemplating some scenarios as well, for my clients, to kind of talk them into, some type of scenario, like creating a duplicate workload, just staged just in case something happens, you can just cut off and, accept some losses, right? I mean, because when you do that, you have to accept that there is going to be some data loss, and how much data loss can you really absorb, right? So
exactly. And then I think it also comes down to where does that data loss live, right? Is it a foundational application like what companies call data fabric, where everyone, all of the other applications are dependent on that, that kind of core, data fabric element? If they lost data, that's not impacting themselves, that's impacting the rest of the company. What's the, so, at other companies, as well as my current company, these tabletops include all the way up to the CISO. And, it's like, okay, we're not only going to look at what we would need to do, and we've defined that, years ago, but it's more about where would we fall on the dollars, right? How much money would we lose, and how many days would it take us to recover? Because sometimes, depending on, because you're going to have, event in different categories. If you need to go to category 1, then it would be this level of impact. If you're it's like a hurricane, right? I used to work at the weather company, and we, always prepared ourselves for hurricane season. So if you have a category 5, guess what? That might take you 2 weeks to recover. Doesn't mean that you don't have what you need, right? You just might have your data in tape library somewhere, or I don't know, I'm just using examples of what a category 5 would be. And it just means that, sure, you can recover. It's just going to take you longer, depending on how large of an impact, versus if it's a 1 or a 2 and it's a smaller impact, you might be able to recover in 48 hours, right? And so I think that also plays in to, every company needs to be smart and not just look at it through one lens, that it's like, oh, I'm just going to have an attack and I need to do X. You really need to have different flavors based on the level of event, right? And how much loss occurs versus, versus not.
thank you.
Absolutely. I haven't luckily had to go through one of those in my career yet, but I have talked about it many, many, many times. And you just need a playbook, right? So put your thoughts down, create a playbook, and get some input from others. It's definitely something that everybody needs to be hypersensitive about these days, because there's a lot of money on the line. Anybody else?
Okay.
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Well, I kind of have a comment just around, I guess, security as well. And I guess a bit also around like network, something that I guess like my team's kind of been exploring this week a bit is kind of like, I guess, the risk, I guess, associated with maybe the apps that we're probably working on. So we were trying to, as a developer, like there's always the risk of, like committing credentials, like, storing those in your repository. And one, like, is that we're kind of trying to assess like how much of a risk is that versus maybe, committing something and pushing it into like our CDN that might be hosted in like, S3, for example, since we're using AWS. Mm-hmm. So that was something that we're trying to, I guess, figure out the risk, I guess, associated with that. And basically also how to potentially, I guess, eliminate that risk. Like, how do you kind of stop developers from maybe pushing directly to the CDN? How do you kind of scour all of the potential CDNs you have out there that may have things that are pushed into it that shouldn't be exposed? So that's something that we've been exploring recently. So any comments around that would be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that it segues real quick into a topic of, so I didn't cover it, but at least it's big within my current company. We have security advisement teams, and then we also have security ISOs. So information security officers for each of our different, global business units. And what's great is they are kind of at that forefront of risk, security risk assessment and decisioning. So to your point, right, in that scenario, we would have not only our ISO and advisors, right, our security advisement team go and look, but that's where monitoring and all of the security scanning, and we've got massive security teams who do nothing but just monitor and scan all day long. That's all they do, and they pump out reports like twice a day. So in that state, there's a way for those teams to get in front of monitoring and calling out any bad actors. We call them bad actors because there are teams that no matter what you do, and you're like, you keep being non-compliant, and I'm gonna put you in a change freeze, then they're just a bad actor. And then you have to take, other measures, because that's what the company has to do. But if it's not a bad actor and it's like a oops, right, you can still call that out. But yeah, just be careful, because when you talk about repositories, right, whether they're using, Bitbucket, whether they're using GitHub, whatever the company is choosing to use for their repositories, that's a SaaS solution, right? It's still sitting in X, and you need to make sure that you have a secure way of doing it that way. I would absolutely say make sure the company is fully assessing the risk of where it should be. So if you put it in S3 buckets in Amazon, then you've got that Amazon umbrella around it, right? And what's great about cloud providers is you're getting some top-notch security around whatever you're storing and in their, in their environment, versus anything that you have to 100%, secure in your environment. So I think that plays into it, but you also just have to make sure this is where training, so education is key. It's like what we say to, kids all day long. You can learn something, but if you learn it and you don't absorb it and you don't retain it, and then you don't, your behavior does not, basically match it, then you're not following what you need to do to be compliant, right? So I think, consistently doing just continual education for how teams should be operating is something that you've got to do, any organization. And no matter how much a team is praised for getting stuff over the line, and you know what I mean, like, yep, we got some wins, we still have to make sure that they're doing it the right way. Yeah. So all that's the fun of just management, right? Managing the outcome, managing what needs to happen, and then managing the outcome. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Shanika, have you looked into Macy as well to see whether or not that can scan for any SPI information on your S3?
Feel free to post it in the chat. I think I was exploring that a little bit to think like maybe, AWS Macy. I think there's maybe one called Comprehend. So it's a part of where we're at now is kind of more like just trying to understand like the risk, like what's the biggest risk for us, and maybe if possible, what's like, the low hanging fruit to kind of try to attack first. So, but it's interesting. I didn't really think of that problem before. So it's an interesting problem.
Yeah, and the one where we see all the time is what's your company's compensating controls versus a cloud provider's controls. Does that make sense? So if you're not going to be an S3 bucket and you're going to be CDN, like what's protecting that? What's the risk of putting it there, right? And then maintaining and supporting it. So compensating controls is a big term in security. Absolutely. And assessing risk also should include the business. There's got to be somebody who can be the D in decision to, really, you got to give them the information, but then they also have to be able to assess, right? Because the business has to make those decisions every day. to say, okay, yep, I realize this, but I need to do X. So I'm either a yay or a nay. Who else? Anyone else? The joys of security?
I'll ask the question that everybody wants to ask, but they don't want to. What do you think about the Apple news of the last day?
I actually don't even know what that is. So I have
Okay.
crazy busy at work and I haven't heard anything. I haven't been on social media, I haven't been on anything. So tell me what's in short version, what's going on with Apple?
Well, very short version, and someone else can fill in if they want to, but I mean, it was basically an emergency patch that you were supposed to put on any Apple device.
Oh,
So yeah.
gotcha. That's a big one for Apple because any Apple device is like trillions across the globe.
Exactly.
Apple has always kind of been known, and so that's one of the things, right? Apple's been known to have some of the best security. So that's interesting because that means either someone didn't patch and they needed users to patch, or they caught something before it was detrimental. However, there just was there was a risk for it being impacting. It's interesting because it's kind of like AT&T. AT&T has such a wide net. There's certain things that they have to do at times, but yeah, patching. So I did not talk about patching. Patching is also, I should have it somewhere in this deck. It is the number one thing that can cause a data breach. If your teams don't patch, and you're like, oh, you know what? It's Friday. I'm just going to wait and I'm going to do it on Monday. Over the weekend, someone will go and hack your stuff. Like, it is a known fact in IT and in technology. So patching is huge, pulling the current image, making sure that you have any and every policy. Patching's a big deal, but I'm surprised that they couldn't push. I wonder why Apple couldn't push a policy change to all devices and they needed users to do it. That's very interesting because I used to manage web and mobile, and I lived and breathed that world for 2 years, and it's like, why couldn't they just push? I wonder if they pushed a patch and everyone just had to go to the Apple store and update. I don't know. I don't know.
No idea either. Yeah, it was interesting. I pasted a link if anyone did want to check out an article, something related to, but I remember this week seeing it too, and I kind of brushed it off until I saw like even my company's email. They're like, make sure you update your device. So
yeah, so I'm clearly out of the mix. But that's scary. And then look, Steve Jobs is no longer around to go tell people what they need to go do in Apple. So yeah, and you know what, guys, just to be realistic, that's not going to go away anytime soon. We have individuals who are learning code at like 5. And so I think about the next 10 years and we're going to have an entire generation of programmers who doesn't mean that they're all going to be negligent, but I just, the world of technology and the world of what we have to do to continue to try to get in front of, you know what I mean, having those types of scenarios. I mean, it's just going to continue to grow. So that's where I play back into my first statement at the beginning of the session. If you have any interest in security, it is a very high demand industry. It's not going away anytime soon. So
that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much for being with us again this evening, Ashleigh. I guess we'll leave it open if there's any other questions or any other dialogue we want to have.
I guess one plug from BDPA. I think Victor kind of mentioned a bit at the beginning, like our STEM program. Something that we've kind of wanted to also run within the STEM program is a AWS session, or I guess sessions for students. So if anyone does have is interested in kind of helping create curriculum for AWS to help teach like high school, college students, then feel free to reach out to us. That's probably something that we would like to have going pretty soon. So yeah, anyone else with an AWS program background that'd be interested in helping build out a curriculum for like high school students, feel free to reach out to us.
Hey, Shanika, we're an AWS partner, so I'd be glad to talk to you guys about that, anything that we can do to help.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, definitely, Harold, if I am not already connected with you on LinkedIn, let's connect.
Okay, will do.
Yep, I was gonna say Harold is probably very interested. Absolutely, and I've done a lot with AWS. I just don't know if I have time, but absolutely, just ping me, Shanika, if you get to, you need to run something, by me or whatever. I've been in the world of AWS for about 4 years, so maybe longer, maybe 5.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds great. Yeah, we're definitely trying to build out a curriculum, and I think one of the I guess essentially the goal is for students that maybe it's kind of like alternative curriculum for students that maybe don't go through college and get the 4-year degree. It's kind of an alternative for them. So it's kind of having that focus, but then also having the focus of how do you gear this in a way that's interesting for students? How do you create benchmarks to know that they're actually like learning the material? So anything there, yeah.
Yeah, and those cloud certifications are great because it kind of gets them, gets them in the mix of trying to understand what it is, So the last thing I'll say, and I know we're going to be over time, we're just at 7:30. The last thing I would call out that I didn't mention, that's a big one, is make sure that all of you look at the cloud provider security features. So like I mentioned, right, your company can have certain security controls, but then these cloud providers are putting a lot of money into their security controls. And so I also manage Google, and in our GCP platform, AWS has like Control Tower and some other things, but GCP has kind of, it wasn't as mature a few years ago, but they've ramped it up, and they have a feature called VPC service controls. My team and I, like I'm the owner of it, I manage and support it, even though it's a security feature. It's fantastic though, because it 100% adds layers of protection that say your non-prod environments can't talk to your prod environments. And if if your teams are trying to do something that is trying to go connect to an unauthorized network, then that VPC service control feature is going to block it. So there's just a lot of good security features that you get with the platform, right? With those, with those cloud providers that are just gonna, 100% let you add additional layers of protection for all of your data. Probably the last thing I call out is provider services and features.
To your point, Ashley, so how would you rank the providers? And would you say AWS from a security standpoint in what you've been exposed to? 1, 2, 3.
I can't say that publicly.
You want to put in the chat?
Who is this shared with? No, I have my AWS and Google folks like in the same room, and I used to tell everybody to live in the same sandbox because we're multi-cloud. So to be honest, we have been in Google for 3 years. Google is, what I love about Google is they addressed a lot of the stuff that was difficult in AWS. And then AWS, it's kind of like, they differentiated themselves, right? So yeah. AWS is very difficult to manage at the account, and you know what I mean, at the security groups, and like IAM in AWS is kind of a headache and a nightmare. Doesn't mean that that it's not secure. It's just hard to manage. It's hard to wrap, management around AWS identity access management, IAM. Whereas in Google, they made it very easy. However, there's other things in Google that, it's like
Sure.
Azure or anything else. They're trying to get there. So AWS as a platform is obviously more mature. They've been out longer. I think it really just depends on, what do you have within your company's workforce to be able to put, some extra time into, if it's just more of, if it's gonna be more of a churn to manage it versus to just, you know what I mean, deploy it.
Right.
Does that
Deploy
make
it. Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. No, it makes great
Benefit
sense. No, I
management,
appreciate it.
very different.
Yeah.
So,
Because
but
we
yeah,
have private and government clients. So,
absolutely. And I mean,
right.
I'm financial services and government. So it's
Yeah.
like, you take all of that and so yeah, but it's a good question. I would definitely put AWS at the more, more mature,
Mhm.
more mature, but Google has been fantastic of
Mhm.
tackling some of the things that makes them stand out. And they're also known to be a data platform. So we chose Google to be our enterprise strategy because of all of the data that we have. And we have not been sorry. So,
Great.
we have been able to scale globally in a very short amount of time. And them as a data platform are fantastic. So think about it, all of their security features and everything that they're honing in on and spending money to provide for customers is revolving around data protection and data security. So, but that doesn't mean Amazon's not doing it too, right? So but they're just, I gotta play my cards well, because
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
probably a
yeah, I
little
guess.
salty that we chose Google to be the enterprise strategy and that AWS is there for M&As and some other things, but they're just not where we're going to put everything, right? So that's where every company just has to be really diligent about your multi-cloud strategy, right? You have to know
Yeah.
what you need each platform to solve for. And then you also need to know, I mean, we have Azure as well, right? So we have three.
Mhm.
And we have use
Mhm.
cases in our, within our organization that all apply to one of those platforms. It's just the majority of it is going to apply to Google. And that's one of the things you have to account for in cloud transformation.
Great. No, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, I'd love to have a conversation about how you, what you put out in the public cloud versus what you keep on-prem and
Absolutely.
decisions related to that. And
I used to be IBM and they had a private cloud. So I came
right.
from
Yes.
private, I went from AWS to IBM private to
Yeah.
then, you know what I mean, to then back to AWS and Google. And yeah, that hybrid, that kind of hybrid cloud approach, it's really just subjective to what your company, what industry are they in? What are they trying to do? Where are they trying to scale? Yeah, but yeah, happy to take that offline.
Great. Thank you.
All right. If nothing else, John, you want to close us out?
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for being with us. It's a great session, just loaded with great insights. So we all of us appreciate you so much. Shanika, I don't know if you have anything you want to close with, but look forward to next month's session, and I'll turn it over to you, Shanika.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, thanks again. Thanks, Ashley, for spending time with us this evening. Yeah, a lot of, I guess, good things to think about, especially like as I know for me, as I continue to work in the cloud and continue to, I guess, push out apps and hopefully don't have them be risky. So yeah, thanks for the details this evening. So again, for everyone that joined, thank you. If feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. Look out for I guess notifications on the next session coming up the third Wednesday of October. So thank you and have a good evening, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.